So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the rule of three. If you've never heard about this rule before, it's really fantastic for interviews. It's something that I bring into every single one of my interviews, and I have ever since my very first interview. And it actually got me my very first internship. So I want to talk today about what it is and how you can apply it in your life. If you've never been on the show, this is Tech Intern, and our goal is to help you get your next internship. If you get any value out of this video, please subscribe to hear more content like it, and I can't wait to see you again. I want to start off with a little story. So in my very first interview of all time, for my very first internship, and when I walked in the door, I shook hands with the guy and sat down, and he immediately said to me, "Hey, I like to do something a little bit different here. What I want to do is reverse the roles here. I want you to interview me." If that happened to you, what would you do? You might panic a little bit, especially if it's your first interview. So you can imagine just how many nerves I had going into that interview. And speaking to other people that also did that interview, the common thing I heard is people froze and they said, I don't know. Can you just interview me? Like, people actually would say that to him. And so I was given the job because I immediately asked him questions. And I already had 3 questions ready to go. Those questions were the rule of 3. So the rule of 3 is that you always have 3 questions going into an interview. Always 3 questions. Now, you'll always ask these at the end of the interview. You always want to make sure you ask questions at the end of the interview. Never leave an interview without asking at least 1 question. The rule of 3 takes a lot of pressure off you, because when you go into an interview, you have to ask questions at the end of it. Now, usually it's best to ask questions that are specific to the company or specific to that job. But sometimes when you're in an interview, you get nervous. Maybe you kind of blank out a little bit in the middle. Maybe you didn't have time to research the company before you went into the interview. So it's really nice to have at least 3 questions to fall back on as your go-to. And these questions are not just random. They're not these really generic ones. They're actually well-crafted questions. These questions are going to help you tell the employer something about you. So in that interview, I asked him the 3 questions. Then we flipped the interview back to the other way. He started asking me questions again. And then while he was speaking, I came up with questions about the job as we went. And at the end of the interview, I asked some more questions. Now, what is a good example of a generic question that might tell the company something about you? Here's one that I use in all of my interviews, and you are welcome to use it. So what I say is, do you have any opportunities for extended learning, such as lunch and learns or hackathons, company hackathons? This is a fantastic question for 2 reasons. The first being, it tells the employer that you want to learn, that you're there to learn, that you are excited about it, and that you want to learn more. The second reason is because it gives the interviewer a chance to brag about the company. So almost every job in tech is going to have something like this. It's really uncommon for some company to not at least have lunch and learns. So by asking this question, you're giving them the opportunity to tell you more about the company, more about what excites them. For those 2 reasons, that's a fantastic question. Now, another example of a question a good generic question you want to bring into every interview to fall back on might be something like, why do you still work at the company? Now, every time you go into an interview, they'll ask you, why did you apply to this job? Why do you want to work here? Well, if you flip that question around on them, they're often very disarmed. They don't expect that question. I actually had a guy before I was interviewing at my fitness pal. I almost said my fitness buddy. So I was interviewing at my fitness pal. I asked this guy the question, and he said, it's a job. It pays the bills. So that's a really good example of a question that, it gets the interviewer off guard a little bit. And sometimes they'll expose something about the company that maybe is not so great. Now, I've never worked at MyFitnessPal. I'm sure it's a fantastic company to work at. But it might say something about how this guy runs his team very specifically. Now, I implore you to come up with one other question kind of like that on your own. And then before you go into an interview, you should also always come with interview-specific questions for that company. So if you're working at Microsoft, ask something about Azure or a Microsoft product, or how they do, I don't know, some process, code reviews. I don't know, something that you think is very specific to a company. But these are questions that you can fall back on in the worst case. You didn't have time to prepare questions for the interview. you forgot what the interview said during the middle because you were so nervous, you forgot what the questions were you had for the company specifically. You always have those, always prepare well, but these 3 questions, maybe 4 questions you can have, this rule of 3 will always be with you, and it'll always take the pressure off you because you know that no matter what happens, you always have something to fall back on. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you got any value out of it, please subscribe. We're also doing a resume critique giveaway. I want to help you get your next internship. I want to see those resumes. So please go to the channel, find that video, and follow the instructions in it. I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much.